Okay, everybody, we're on Masechet Eruvin Daf Chaf, and we have today three basic topics. First, we're going to be seeing two more queries that Abaye asks of Rava. In the Daf yesterday, we saw four of them, and so this is two more. The first one's going to be about a wall enclosure, Haseh Biraot, that are connected to a courtyard. And then what if the water in the well dries up on Shabbat? Interesting problem. Then next section is about throwing an object into the Haseh Biraot. And the last topic is regarding the head and most of one's body have to be in the enclosure regarding an animal. And we have two versions of that question. So let's get right into it. Be'amine Abaye meraba. Haser sherosha nichnas leben hapasin. מהו לטלטל מתוכה לבין הפסין ובין הפסין לתוכה? אמר le mutar. So here's a picture. So I have a courtyard where people live here, right? Just one courtyard, and it opens up into the Haseh Biraot. I have a well outside, all right, with the corner brackets. So the corner brackets are here for the passers-by, and the Reshut Rabim, and when they're walking, they can stop here, they can draw water, drink it inside the corner brackets, and that's okay. The question is, can I carry from this section into this section? Basically, the question is, I know these corner brackets make it a Reshut HaYachid. However, in general, when you have one Reshut HaYachid connected to another Reshut HaYachid, let's say this courtyard and this courtyard, right? I have my courtyard, your courtyard, and yours, and they're connected with an opening. Well, even though they're both Reshut HaYachid, we have to make an Eruv. That's the whole point of an Eruv. We have to share, connect them with an Eruv by making them one courtyard. So the question here is, do I have to make an Eruv between the Haseh Biraot and the personal courtyard? And the answer is, no, you don't have to. It's okay to leave it as is, because the Haseh Biraot, the well, is not really owned by any one person. It's owned by the many people passing through. And therefore, there's no need to make an Eruv. You can use it just like that. That is Rabba's answer. All right, now we get more complicated. Shetayim mai amale asur. What if there's two? So configuration like this, okay? I have one courtyard here, another courtyard here, right? And those are not connected to each other, but they are both open to the same Haseh Biraot. So can I carry from here to here and back and here to here and back, right? And all the way around? And the answer is no, you cannot, because although this is owned by the public, so it's no individual ownership. So I could do it in one way for one courtyard, but here, now I'm going to carry from here to here and from there into another courtyard, and that's no good. Even, we're going to see, even if you make an Eruv. Well, why not? If you make an Eruv, why is it bad? Right? Rava Amar Erevo Mutar. Okay, so even if you make an Eruv, it's no good. The reason why an Eruv here is no good, because we know we have a concept of two courtyards, right, that share a common area. That's called Mavoy. That's what we spent the entire first Perek talking about. And a Mavoy, that kind of alleyway, has definite limitations and restrictions about its size and shape that we learned, that it has to have walls, right? 3 full walls and a post or something. This cannot serve as a mavoy. This cannot join two chatzerot so that you could do a shituf mevoot. So therefore, the rabbi said, even that in this case, you cannot make an eruv because this is not a mavoy. So that's what Rav Huna said, right? Even if you make an eruv, because people will think that you're allowed to, that the Eruv works for between Pasin, like if the Pasin were between them, between the two Eruvs. Rava, however, says, Erevo mutar. He thinks that's perfectly fine, right? He would say, look, if it was in the middle of them and the two courtyards weren't connected to each other, then maybe, right? But in this case, he says, it's okay, you make an Eruv. Now we have a proof for him. Amale Abayel Rava Tanya, the Messiah lach. חסר שראשה אחד נכנס לבין הפסין, מותר לטלטל מתוכה לבין הפסין, ובין הפסין לתוכה, אבל שתיים אסור. Okay, so if I have one courtyard, then I'm allowed to carry from the courtyard to the enclosed well, back and forth. If it's two of them, two courtyards, I cannot, unless I make an eruv. So there you go. That's exactly Rava. So an eruv works to connect them. Well, this statement, which is a braita, seems to reject Rav Huna, who said that you cannot carry even if you make an eruv. Malach Rav Huna, hatam tehadran ve'arban. It's where you literally rejoin it. It seems to mean a case like this, where I have not only a one opening, right, but many openings. So that, yeah, in the previous case, let me clarify. When Rav Huna said that it's not good, he was talking about a case where it has one opening, right? Everyone agrees if it has nothing, right? If the two courtyards are not connected to each other at all, then you need a mavoy, and this is not a mavoy. It's not okay. The case where there's machloket, and Rava says it's okay, is when there is an opening, right? So there's one opening, so I made an eruv, and therefore I can use this. And Rav Huna says, I cannot do that for a gezerah. If I say that this is okay, then you might come to think that this would be okay also. However, everyone agrees, and this is Rav Huna thinks the Braita is talking about this case, is where there are two openings. Besides the regular opening, there's also a major breach in that wall. And because there's a breach, everybody who's passing by or inside knows that the reason why you can carry here is because of the breach, and you made an eruv. And no one would come, therefore, to think that there's a possibility that if this wall was solid, that you could make an eruv. And so that's how he resolves his opinion with Rav Huna resolves his opinion with the Baraita. Okay, and so that is the end of the first query of Abaye to Rava. And now we go to the second interesting case when the water dries up. All right, we know that this paseh biraot, these corner brackets, are only work for access to water. It's a special leniency so that people can go and drink when they are on the road on Shabbat. So ba'amine Abaye merabah yaveshu mayim b'Shabbat mahu. What if that well, that cistern dries up on Shabbat and there's no more water in it? Now all of a sudden, right, this having those corner brackets is not enough to make this into a reshut hayachid. So does it suddenly become prohibited from carrying inside? Amar le kilum naaset mechisa ela bishvil mayim enkan mechisa enkan. Says that's right. It only was allowed because of the water. Now, if there's no water, there's no partitions. I know we said earlier that, for example, in a case where I have a house and two walls fall down, we said you're still allowed to carry, right? Because once it's permitted on, according to one opinion, once it's permitted on Friday afternoon when Shabbat starts, it continues to be permitted. But that would not apply here. That only applies in that case where there were actual walls. In this case, we're just using these special corner boards that is a special leniency. And so that does not carry over if there's no actual water there. Okay, so that's a simple case. Let's go to a more complicated case. First, the cistern dried out and then would not be allowed to carry. But then it rained and the cistern filled up again. Oh, good, now we have rain again. Can that reinstate the status of the corner boards and now once again be allowed to carry? Regarding, he's separating into two questions. Regarding your first question, if it dries out on Shabbat, that's the question that we just had, right, from Rabbah, and that is as prohibited. So you have to stop carrying. But then when it rains again, that would be okay, because that's considered a case of a mechisa that was made on Shabbat. And we have a general rule about mechisot that all of a sudden appear or are built on Shabbat. As a braita, betanya, all mechisa suya b'Shabbat, ben b'shogeg, ben b'mezid, ben be'ones, ben b'rason, shema ha'mechisa. No matter how the mechisa got there, whether someone came and violated Shabbat, he shouldn't have done that, and he built a wall, or something else moved away, and then a wall appeared. I don't know, a garbage truck happened to come and dumped some garbage, and now that's a wall. But however it got there, it doesn't matter. It is a mechitza. And so therefore, in this case also, although those corner beads, those corner boards had no purpose when there was no water there, but once it rains, now they all of a sudden come alive. And although it comes alive on Shabbat, it's permitted, and you can start carrying again. All right, so some back and forth about this case. Hold on, Rav Nachman said about that baraita that when we said a wall that is made on Shabbat is considered a wall, that was only lechumra. That just means that, if I have an area and all of a sudden, right, the Parks Department comes and puts a fence around the park, that means that I am not allowed, it becomes a reshut hayachid lechumra, meaning I can't throw a ball from reshut harabim into that park, which is now reshut hayachid. But it can't be used for leniency. It doesn't mean that now I can go in the park and start carrying in there, right? That's what this, that Nachman says, that's what this meant. And therefore, in our case too, when all of a sudden the well fills up on Shabbat, you say, okay, the walls now are effective. That should only mean that the walls are effective to the extent that I cannot transfer from outside Reshut Harabim to inside the corners, inside those four corners, because now Reshut Hayachid. It doesn't mean likula that I can carry within them. No, we reject that. Rav Nachman when Rav Nachman said this rule that you're not allowed to use them for leniency, that was only if someone built it on purpose. You can't benefit from someone who violated Shabbat. However, if it happened just on its own, it was a little earthquake and all of a sudden something appeared, then that's okay. Good. So that concludes section 1, right? The questions Abaye asked of Rava and a little bit more about that. But since we mentioned throwing an object into a well, into a Reshut Hayachid, now we're going to have a discussion about that, throwing an object into a well enclosure, right? So, right, again, a well enclosure means right, anything like this. And the case now we're going to be talking about is what if there's no well there? Right. Obviously, if there is a well, then it's considered reshut hayachid, and you can carry inside, and you cannot carry from outside to inside. But if there's no well there, do the 4 enclosures have any effect? Certainly not for leniency. You can't carry inside because that's a special leniency to access water. But how about lechumra? And I then throw an object from outside to inside, and if I have only 4 corner beads and no well. So it leads really to the foundation of how does this whole structure work in the first place. So let's see. Amarabi El Azar is the first generation, an early Amora. Hazorek leben paseh biraot hayav. If you throw something into the corner brackets of a well, one is liable. Pishita ila mechisa yechi mishtadeh lemalot. Of course it's allowed. Of course it's chayav. If it's not a partition, how would we be allowed to use it when there is water there and to draw from? So he says, no, I know that's obvious. I'm asking a more complicated question. When I arrange an enclosure like this and there's no well, that's what I'm talking about. And I still say it's chayav. So Talmud says haname peshita. That's also obvious. Ila de be'alma mechisahi abebor hechi mishtadele letaltule. If not that, in general, in any case, it is considered a partition. These 4 things are considered a partition, a proper partition. Then how would I be allowed to use it when there's a well? In other words, it has to be that on the deoraita level, this is a partition. In general, the rabbis do not allow it, except for when there's a well. But that has to be that fundamentally, it is a mechitza, and therefore I would be chayav if I throw into it. So that's also obvious. Oh, it's talking about a case where people tend to pass right through it. They walk, it's right in the middle of the street, and lots of people are walking through those enclosures. And there's a general rule, if people are walking through the enclosures and treating that area like a thoroughfare, then that detracts from the effectiveness of those partitions. And so he's saying, even if people run through it, and so therefore it looks like it's all Reshut Rabim, still, if you throw into it, it's your chayav. In other words, still considered Reshut HaYachid from the letter of the law. Okay. So what is this whole thing teaching us? You're teaching us that when the public walks through it, it does not detract from its effectiveness as a partition. Rabbi Elazar already taught us that in a different place. And so we're kind of treating even Amoraic statements as if they were like the Torah. You can't say anything twice, and Amoraim can't teach something twice because that would be redundant. I mean, I'm sure Amoraim taught their lessons many times. They had to repeat them, but I suppose this means that some of their teachings get officially recorded in the oral tradition and memorized. And so we have another tradition that he taught that teaches the same lesson. And so what do we need both of them for? Ditnan, where do we see that? It's a comment that Rabbi Elazar made about this Mishnah. Ditnan, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im hayta derech reshut harabim mafsaktan, yisalekenna listadim. Chachamim omerim, eno sarich. So if you had this well area and people are walking right through it, then you have to reroute the people so that they go around it. Chachamim say it's okay, you don't have to, right? So you see, Chachamim don't think that the people walking through it detracts from the partitions. Rabbi Yochanan v'Rabbi Elazar, that's our Rabbi Elazar. Damre tarvaihu kan hodiacha kohan shel mechisot. Oh, this teaches us the power of these partitions, that they are not canceled, even though there are many passers-by. Okay, so there you go. See, Rabbi Elazar taught us here that passers-by do not detract from the mechisot. So since I know it from here, what do I need this teaching that he said above about throwing into it, that you're chayav if you throw into it? I already knew this principle from here. Well, if I only had this statement here, I would have said he's simply explaining Chachamim. So he's saying, according to Chachamim, passers-by don't detract from the walls. But it doesn't mean that he agrees with it. Perhaps it's only a commentary. That's why I need the first statement about throwing to teach me that he, in fact, agrees with it. All right, but just tell me the second one, and I don't need this. I don't just tell me the first one, and I don't need the second one. Very interesting answer. He says, you're right, he didn't actually say both of them. He only said one of these statements, and it's his students that then applied his opinion to the other case. And so that resolves the problem of the redundancy, because he didn't actually say both of them. But this teaches us a very important principle, that sometimes when the Talmud quotes something in someone's name, it doesn't necessarily mean that they said it. It could be an inference based on something else that they said, and it's applied to another case. Okay, good. And so now that brings us to the last section, which is regarding the Mishnah said that you have to make sure there's room for an animal's head and most of its body within the well enclosure so that it can drink. And now we're wondering, is that if the animal's restrained, like if I'm holding on to it, do I still need it? And then there's another version of that question with all of the same discussion. What if it's not restrained? Okay, so let's see. Mutar lakrib labe'er tenan hatam lo ya'amod. Right, so that's what the Mishnah said, has to be big enough that the cow can drink with most of its head and body inside. Tenan hatam lo ya'amod adam b'rshut harabim v'yishteh b'rshut hayachid, b'rshut hayachid v'yishteh b'rshut harabim. Okay, so another Mishnah applies this to human beings, that if you're in the Reshut HaYachid and then there's some water in the Reshut HaRabim, or the other way around, you shouldn't just stand over the border and sip, from just put your head over, because what will end up happening is you'll have your cup and you'll end up moving the cup across the threshold, and you'll end up transferring from one domain to the other. Rather, you should have your head and most of your body within the same place where the water is, so that you won't be drawn after it. The same halacha we have regarding a sukkah. The smallest sukkah has to be one where your head and most of your body are in the sukkah together with your table. Because if your table is outside and you're inside the sukkah, you're going to end up moving out, and then you won't be eating in the sukkah anymore. Okay, so that's regarding.
That's a machloket, right?
What? That's a machloket, yes.
One opinion is just Rosh Verubo.
Right, Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai. Good. V'chen ba'gat. And also regarding a wine press, there's a halacha that if you want to drink wine at the wine press, you're allowed to drink it without taking ma'as teruma and ma'aser. Because it's just temporary drinking. I'm just kind of like tasting it in the factory, so that's okay. But here, so it has to be in the factory. Let's say you're outside the factory and you're kind of reaching in and sipping it from over the threshold. So in that case, also most of your body should be inside and not drinking it outside. Good. That's all good for human beings. Now, how about for animals? Animals also, we said in this case, has to be mostly inside. Now, here's the question. Para, mi ba'inan la rosha veruba o lo? Right? What about regarding a cow? Kol echad denaket mana velanaket la, lati ba'elach deba'e rosha veruba milegav. If it's a case where I'm holding on to the bucket and I'm not holding on to the animal, right? The animal is not restrained. Then we don't have to ask. Obviously, you need most of it to be inside, right? Otherwise, it might pull back, and then I'm holding the bucket, and I'm gonna move the bucket outside of the partition, and I'll be carrying. So everyone agrees if it's not restrained. Now the question is, what if I am holding on to the animal as well? Kind of like this, right? Holding on to it as well and holding on to that. So then I don't have to worry that the animal is going to go out. So in that case, do I also need for most of it to be inside? Or how about if just the head is inside? Even if the rest of it is not, would that be allowed? Okay, so we're asking for this about this possible leniency. It said, oh, we answered that. Our Mishnah says, as long as most of it is inside and is drinking. Isn't the Mishnah talking about a case where I am holding the animal and also holding the bucket, and yet it says it has to be mostly inside? So you see, I'm not allowed, right? The Mishnah didn't make any distinction. No, it's probably talking about a kind of standard case where the animal is going and drinking, and I'm not holding on to it, and that's why it has to be mostly inside. But if I was holding on to the animal, then the Mishnah would not apply, and it could be just its head. I don't need its body inside. I mean, basically, it's inconclusive, but right, it's possible that it would be allowed. Okay, now we're going to step back. A more general question. Hold on. Wait, even if I'm not holding the animal, is it allowed at all to hold the bucket, even if there is room for most of its body inside? Can I hold a bucket for an animal in any case? I'm not allowed to take water to fill up a bucket and put it in front of and hold it in front of the animal. However, I can pour it into its trough, and the animal will come and drink on its own. So I can leave it there, but I cannot hold it in front of it. So therefore, you see, in general, it's not allowed to hold in front of the animal, and it doesn't matter even if it is inside the partition. So this is like, a question on all the cases. No, we can resolve that. This is talking about a very specific case. It's talking about this kind of unusual case here, like this, where the animal is in its pen in one area, and then you have a reshut harabim in between, and the paseh biraot after that. And this feeding trough extends from the animal in the reshut hayachid all the way to where I am in the well area. And so says the question is about taking, so it says that I am not allowed, this is what that source was saying, I'm not allowed to take a bucket and feed it to the animal, if let's say it was very close by, over a threshold, but what I can do is pour it into its feeding trough, and then it would go by itself and the animal would eat there. This is the case where it's not allowed. And so why is it not allowed in such a case to hold on to the bucket? Gezerah dilma chazele le'evus demikalkel v'atel takone udra le'davla behadeh ekam apik mereshut hayachid leshut harabim. The problem is, here's another picture, right? That I'm going to see that there's a break, right? There's some damage done to the feeding trough, and then I'm holding onto the bucket. I'm going to see that, and I'm going to walk outside holding the bucket and put it down in order to repair this area. And then I'm going to be transferring from the reshut hayachid into the reshut harabim. That's the reason why I can't hold on to this and feed the animal directly. Right? I have to only pour and put it down so that I won't come to carry the bucket outside. So that is the only problem. But if it was a different case, not like this, where the animal was inside here with me, then I could hold the bucket, and that would not be a problem. Okay, good. Now, v'chi haikavna, still another question about this case. This case where I'm not, it's a problem because I may go carry the bucket outside in order to repair. V'chi haikavna michayav, even if I did carry the bucket outside to repair, would it be chayav in any case? Amar Rav Safra, Amar Rav Ameh, Amar Rav Yochanan, hamfaneh hafasa mizavit lezavit v'nimlach alehen v'osian patur shelo hayta akira misha'a rishona lechach. This is a very interesting halacha. Let's say I'm taking my things in my courtyard and I'm moving it from here to there. I'm tidying up the items, and then I picked up one item to take it from this side to that side. But that's when I picked it up. I had intention that I would put it down within the courtyard. But then I got distracted, or I changed my mind, and I ended up taking it outside. Like I'm picking up a shovel just to move from here to there, and then all of a sudden my neighbor says, "Hey, can you bring me that shovel?" And then I bring it to him. In that case, patur abal asur. I'm not allowed to do it on purpose, but it's okay midoraita. Why? Because at the time I picked it up with proper intention, put it down within the chased, and only later did I take it out. And midoraita, you need to have akira, picking up, and transferring across the border in order to be chayav. In this case, although I picked it up, and I picked it up on purpose, but I didn't pick it up with intention to transfer it outside. And therefore, I have only the transferring and not the picking up. And so it would not be chayav. And so that is similar to this, applies to this case where I picked up the bucket in order to feed an animal inside here. And only then I changed my mind. I said, oh, there's a break in the trough, and I carried it outside. So in any case, that would be patur and not hayav. And therefore, I shouldn't make a gezerah and say, I'm not allowed to carry the bucket at all, just in case I do that, because you wouldn't make a gezerah for something that's patur in any case. So rather, here's what I'm worried about. The problem is that the problem is different. Sometimes I will go and carry the bucket out in order to fix it and put it down. That's patur. But the problem comes after that. After I fix it, then I'm going to pick the bucket back up and bring it back into the reshut hayachid. And in that case, I'm picking it up in order to bring it into the reshut hayachid. And that's the case where I would be chayav. And so that's why in this kind of setup, I cannot hold the bucket and feed the animal. But it's only in this kind of setup because I'm afraid, because there's space in between. If there was not space in between and I could just see the animal came right in here, then I would be allowed to hold the bucket and feed the animal. Okay, that's the end of the first version of the question and its answer. However, this was remembered in a second version. A lot of times you have like the same series of questions and answers and sources, but applied in a slightly different way. Again, first of all, because it's memorized, and so it can come to us in different versions, but also I think because as an exercise, you would try to apply the same thing into different cases or flip everything around. So I think this was also done on purpose to as a mental exercise to see how you can apply the same thing in different cases. Okay, okay, we already established that regarding a person, human being, if you are in one area and you want to drink and you want to drink something in another reshut, most of your body has to be in it. What about regarding a cow? So let's get specific. If I am holding it and I'm also holding the animal, then for sure I'm holding both of them, then it's enough that it be inside, right? Most of it be inside. Okay, so now we're saying that that's a case where you need it to be inside, right? This was the case that we were questioning before, whether you need to be inside at all. Okay, so now we're kind of shifting everything to a little bit more stringency. But what about a case where I am not holding it? I'm holding the bucket, but I'm not holding the animal. Is it sufficient that most of it be inside? Or should I be afraid that, yeah, most of it is inside, but since I'm not holding it, it's going to go out, and then I'm going to be drawn after it and carrying the bucket. What is the case? What is the answer? Oh, we resolved that already in the Mishnah. Right? Mishnah said that most of the animal has to be inside. Isn't that talking about a case where I'm holding the bucket, but I'm not holding it? And it says it's permitted. So therefore, I can assume that it's permitted. No, maybe the Mishnah is talking about where I am holding the animal. But if I'm not holding the animal, then even that is not sufficient, right? I have to make sure that I'm holding the animal, or that the entire animal is closed in. And this makes sense. We have a proof for it. Because if I'm holding the bucket and I'm not holding the animal, is it permitted at all, right, to even hold a bucket before an animal in any case? Tanya. So now this baraita, which was a question before on all cases, is still a question, right? On this case, I am not allowed to carry an animal and carry a bucket and feed it to the animal, but I can pour it into its feeding trough and then it drinks on its own. So you see that in all cases, it would be a problem to hold a bucket for an animal, right? Because it might go out and then I'm going to be left holding the bucket outside. No, but that's talking about a different case. It's talking about a trough where the trough itself is 10 tefachim high and it's and 4 handbreadths wide. In other words, it creates its own reshut hayachid. And right, it extends into ben pasin, like a picture we saw before. And sometimes the owner sees that it broke and he's going to go and fix it. And he's carrying his bucket and he's going to go outside and fix it. Maybe he's talking about the general things. If you're holding a bucket in this kind of area and you're doing a lot of things, feeding the animal, you're going to end up carrying it outside. That's what it's talking about. That's why it says you can't hold the bucket in that case where you have the trough that's going into it. But in general case, you could hold the bucket. Hold on. In that case, even if I did carry the bucket outside in order to fix it, it should be okay, because when I lifted the bucket, it was for the purpose of feeding the animal inside, so it was permitted. And then when I carried it outside, I only did half of an action, not a full action. So I wouldn't make a gezerah for something that's patur in any case. אלא זמנין דמתקן לה, ואדם מעייל לה, וכמעייל למרשות הרבים, לרשות היחיד. No, the problem is that then I'm going to put down the bucket outside, and after I finish fixing it, then I'm going to take it up and carry it back inside, and then I would be chayav, and that's why I make a gezerah in that case that I cannot carry the bucket. But it was a general case, not where that trough is sticking into it, or where the animal is inside, then it would be okay to carry the, to hold the bucket and feed the animal from it. And so that is the end of the second version, and we still have no resolution because the sources are ambiguous. However, we do have two now short proofs for the original question, of actually the first version of the question, and we can try to answer it from these. Tashema, Gamal Shiroshav Rabo Mibifnim, Ovsin Oto Mibifnim. So if I have a camel, nice picture. Okay, right. This is talking about force feeding, right? I'm forcing food down the animal's throat. In the case of force feeding, you're going to be holding the animal and holding the food and pushing it down. So if if its head and most of its body is inside, then I can force feed inside that private domain. And this is like a case where I'm holding the bucket and holding the animal, right? Because it's food, but I'm holding the food and I'm holding the animal. And you see that if it's mostly inside, then it's okay. That would resolve our first question. And I do need it inside anyway. In other words, even though I'm holding it, so we're answering it l'chumra, even though I'm holding on to it, I still have to make sure most of it is inside. That would seem to be a good proof. No, you can't bring a proof from a camel because a camel's neck is very long. And so that's, you see, the problem is that it's going to go, and because its neck is so long, it can just turn its head, and then it'll already be outside. And so then, then I'm going to be holding on to it and running after it, and I'm going to end up carrying things outside. So if it's not mostly in, right? In other words, so only for a camel, I have to make sure that most of its body is inside. That way, even if it turns around, it'll still be okay. But other animals, this is no proof, right? Other animals who don't have long necks, perhaps they could be just their head inside, and I'm holding on to it, and they'll still be allowed. So therefore, although yes, you're right, you proved that a camel has to be most of it inside, but it's not a proof for any other animal. All right, one last attempt. Tashema behema. Here's a similar baraita that's talking about all animals, not just the camel. And it says any animal, as long as it's mostly in the private domain, I can force feed it. And so this case, force feeding is like I'm holding the bucket and holding the animal. And you see that it still says most of it has to be inside. There you go, a good resolution for all animals that even if I'm holding the animal, it still has to be mostly inside. So we can resolve our first question. No, not quite yet. My behema named katani gamal. What animals are talking about? Only a camel. So no, you can't use that. Wait, batanya behema, batanya gamal. Hold on, but the first one says a camel. This one says animal. So why wouldn't you say that that's talking about any animal? Or why would these baratot seem to contradict each other? Wait, these baratot are not taught together. It's not like one long baraita. These are separate versions. And so therefore, it's appropriate to use one to explain the other. And so both are talking, in fact, about a camel. We have another opinion that proves this, that one cannot do this regarding a camel because, and it has that reason, because its neck is long. And so therefore, we end this whole discussion without closure about these cases, but it did bring up a lot of very interesting possibilities and theories. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen.